Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of Rostie Talks. I am your host, Tyler Blackwell. As you may have noticed, we are working on a little bit of a different platform this time around. We're actually utilizing Zoom instead of doing the face-to-face meetings as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we are very excited about our guest today. He is a longtime Rostie community member and is actually doing some exciting things in the financial world to help out small businesses like yourself. Daryl Ching, the managing partner of Vistance Capital, is joining me today. Daryl, how you doing?
Doing excellent, Tyler. Very pleased to be here.
We are more than happy to have you on the show today. So just a little background with Daryl. Him and his team are both coming up with a new webinar series that's going to focus on business plans, financial planning, and gaining capital investments. So I'm going to let you take it away, Daryl. Tell me a little bit about yourself, about Vistance Capital, and a little bit more about the webinar series that's going to be rolling out later this month.
Sounds good, Tyler. The birth of Vistance Capital really came from my background in investment banking. I spent 10 years in an industry where I actually was sat on the buy side, reviewing pitch decks, reviewing investor presentations, and taking investments to investors. But what I found was that there was a huge communication gap between investors and companies. And a lot of times deals fell through the cracks, not because the companies didn't operate well, but it was because the documentation they were providing did not meet the criteria for investors. And so I saw a huge opportunity when I left investment banking to take my expertise and help small businesses with capital raising and making sure that they check all those boxes. So while entrepreneurs are very passionate, they talk a lot about their vision, talk a lot about their product and pain points, you have investors sitting there with a checklist going, did they address the strength of the management team? Did they address barriers to entry? Did they address competition analysis? Do they have a good go-to-market strategy? Do they have solid financial projections? And so as you can see, the two different types of people are looking at it from a different lens. And so what I am doing is helping bridge that communication gap by working with small businesses to make sure that they put their best foot forward and put together the best investor presentation and the best materials so that they have the best chance of getting an investment, whether you're looking to raise early stage equity or debt.
That's interesting. Now, I know you mentioned that you work primarily with small businesses. What criteria needs to be met in order for your services to be best fit for a client?
Typically, our ideal client is a client that's generating at least $1 million of revenue. And the reason being that when you have generated revenue, you have proof of concept and you're considered a post-revenue company, and it becomes a lot easier to raise capital than if you are just a concept or if you are just in a stage of developing an application or developing a product. Typically, most of our clients are under 10 million of revenue. And the reason for that is because with companies over 10 million in revenue, some of them typically have full-time CFOs, and so therefore don't require our services as much. CFOs are typically the last executive position that gets hired by a small business. And so we provide that interim gap of fractional services so that we can provide accounting and we can provide a lot of the advice that's required for capital raising and financial planning as well.
So what are some particular topics that you are going to touch on in this upcoming webinar series?
Typically the most common question I get from small businesses is, can you provide me a valuation? What am I worth? And the answer is not so simple. I think a lot of people take a look at what's studied in business school. So they say, oh, I'll just run a discounted cash flow model, or I'll use comparables to public companies. But if you have less than 2 million of revenue, or if you're not profitable, a lot of those methodologies don't apply to you. And the valuation is actually a lot more subjective. In the angel networks, for example, typically investors will have those checklists that I mentioned earlier, and they'll give you a score from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 on each of those criteria. And the higher you score, you get a higher valuation. The lower you score, you get lower the valuation. And the band is typically between 1 and 5 million if you're going for an early stage round of capital raising. So it's not as scientific as you would think. It's more of an art. But what we want to do in this webinar is explain the criteria, what you should be addressing when you go approach investors, whether it's through a roadshow or you just talk directly to an investor, what checkboxes you want to make sure you check, and making sure that you have a top-notch financial model in place with assumptions so that you have your best chance of A, actually getting the investment, and B, deriving the highest valuation possible.
Understood. So if I'm a small business owner watching this Rostie talk right now, and there's interest building up for me to want to be able to participate in your webinar and gain this information, how would I find you?
So you can come directly to our website. We're at www.vistancecapital.com. We have a Vistance Capital Advisory page on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can add me to LinkedIn as well. I do post regular updates and articles on various topics about capital raising and accounting and business issues in general in terms of what I've learned working as an executive, as CFO.
Daryl, I just want to take the time to thank you for coming in today and joining us on our edition of Rostie Talks. I know that I am excited for the webinar that's coming up, and I'm sure that there's quite a few business owners who, again, are going to be coming out of this post-pandemic situation and having to realign their business. And I think that the services that you plan to touch on and educate people on are really going to take a big effect on how they bounce back in the success that they have from having done so. So again, I just want to take time to thank you again for coming in today, sharing your perspective and educating everybody, and more so letting everybody know about the webinar series that is coming up. So thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you, Tyler. I'm just excited as you are.
Have a great day.
Take care.